Now I'm here with Ryan Groves. Ryan,
My
pleasure. It's always a pleasure. And we're here with BodiTrak. Now, what is BodiTrak? Well, you're all hearing about how important ground forces are. And I've been involved with this for over 35 years, where I was actually able to get into a lab in Sentinella in LA and see what ground forces, these force plates. And so the game comes from the ground up. So how you put pressure into the ground kind of has an impact on what happens or doesn't happen in your body.
Yeah.
So what we're going to talk about, I want to have Ryan talk to you a little bit about this, and we're going to go through some things so you can see what this does. I mean, most all the tour players are using these all the time, and because they want to be efficient. And it's about creating efficiency, and it's about understanding what makes what work, what makes your sequence work. So Ryan, you take it. So where are we going to go with this?
Okay, so see if this sounds familiar. I want you to set up at address, be balanced. Let's transfer your weight into your trail side, get everything up to the top, pause, start with your lower body, and then match it all up and post up at impact. Does that sound like anything we've heard?
It sounds like what hurt me as a player.
Okay. Unfortunately, that's not how the best ball strikers in the world throughout the course of history, not now, but throughout the course of history, have played the game. And so all these things do it, and there are lots of good companies who make a similar product. They all give you the same type of information. What it does is it shows you how you're putting those forces into the ground, and they show you in real time.
Okay.
So one of the things, when we talk about biofeedback, or we talk about, the ability to see something, launch monitors are great. I use one every time, but it's always after the fact. You're always having to say, okay, this was the launch condition. One of the great things with, some of the 3D motion capture tools, and also this, is you can actually see it in real time and how you're trying to perform into the ground. So a couple of things you need to understand is that you have to apply some sort of force somewhere to get your body to move. Okay. And the second thing you need to understand is you have a center of mass. So we're not 3D motion capture folks, but it's somewhere in between your belly button and your spine. Okay. And then you have a center of pressure, which would be the average of all your forces into the ground and where that moves around. Now, sometimes they move together, but when you can get them one to move in relation to the other, that's how you create power. Okay, so if I were to lift my foot up, my center of pressure would zip this way and back, but my center of mass stayed still.
Right.
Okay, and another general thing is there are three sort of concentric circles in the golf swing, if we want to simplify it. And so wherever your center of mass moves, your center of pressure will be in a slightly larger circle, and your hand path is in a slightly larger circle. So the way you move that path into the ground has a great influence on the path of your swing.
And so so if we start with setup, because you asked me a question, we were talking earlier about balance.
Right.
And what balance is. And so if I get set up here, if I'm all of a sudden, when I'm standing here, now where is balance? Balance is when your forces are in the center of your foot, because here's what you got to understand, folks. If you get too much on the balls of your feet, this killed me. This was one of the things that got me. They told me, look, Mike, you're sitting back a little too far. You got to get up on the balls of your feet. Well, the way your foot works and the way the ball of your foot works, when you get to a certain point, just about before your toes are going to grab, and if your toes are grabbing, you're off balance for sure, but right before they grab, what happens in your brain goes, uh-oh, we're going to fall down. So what it does is it sends a message all through your structural muscles to contract, to protect your spinal column, because it's anticipating a fall. So people wonder why they get up on the balls of their feet and then they and they can't move. Well, the biggest reason you can't move is because all of your structural muscles are so tight, you've just made it almost impossible for your body to react to motion.
Right. And like I said, nothing in this game is new. And a lot of times these technologies validate what some of the best players and instructors have said throughout the years. So Alex J. Morrison, who is turn of the into the 20th century golf instructor. He actually has a wonderful book where they took an X-ray, which was new technology at the time, of lifting up his toes at address, just inside the shoe. So we want to think about your foot as toes and then ball of the foot to heel. And so you're going to hear me use the word heel-ish. I don't need everything to be all the way into your heels, but what you do need to understand is that when the toes are the brakes, the toes are to stop you from falling over. Balance is keeping your center of mass inside the base of support without falling over. So if you're Tiger Woods or an Olympic skater or somebody who's really good about moving your center of mass around, you've got a lot more room to play with. If you're, I don't know, middle-aged gentleman or lady who spends a lot of time in an office chair and driving and things like that, you probably don't have as much freedom in that, so that as you get out toward your toes, your body wants to stop you from falling over as opposed to getting a square face back to the ball.
You know, you also said, and Ryan said something really interesting there, and I feel like I've been lucky over my career with this, because I studied golf swings. When I got in trouble, I started studying what's common over the history of golf instruction, and I found commonalities, and I started to teach those. And then I started to figure out, okay, why did those commonalities hold over time? Mm-hmm. Well, as I got into the physiology, it became obvious why they held, because they were within what the body wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And what's really interesting, folks, over this whole career of golf, as long as it's lasted, there's one thing that hasn't changed since golf started: the human body. So it still moves the same way it moved 200 years ago. Joints are the same, tendons and ligaments are the same, so the body isn't redesigned. So that's why when I see a lot of things come out there and you go, this is new, well, you got to understand there's a parameter with the human body. You can only go so new. Right. Because it is designed to move a certain way, and you get outside of its design, it might give you one thing, but it shortcuts something else or it sets you up for injury, right. Which is, we're seeing a lot more of that now with golf and the tour.
Now, one thing I do want to point out, I absolutely love everything that has to do with ground force reaction. I built a career off of this. This game is here, okay? And I mean that if you understand how to control face-to-path relationship with your hands, you can play pretty good golf. I have seen golfers with really great hands and very bad pressure traces that sort of play golf. But I've seen a lot of golfers with amazing pressure traces that don't know how to use these, and that doesn't work. So the beauty of this...
I like that.
The beauty of
Can
this...
I use that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The beauty of this is, and I've been a member of your site since its inception. We were talking about this the other night at dinner, even before I was working in the golf industry. Impact is key, right? And anybody who's telling you otherwise is trying to sell you something you don't need. But what this does, and the principles we're going to go over, give you the best chance, the best margin for error, and the most consistent way to apply the face that you're going to have.
Right.
Okay, so let's go over something. I want you to set up to this golf ball, and I'm just going to, the beauty of this technology is that it can be reset at any point in time.
Okay.
So what I've got you is I'm going to set this up here to where you're in the center of this mat. Okay, so what we notice is that if we look at left to right balance, so these are your feet as you look down, and this looks like any kind of weather map or Dr. Scholl's map that you would stand on. That's actually the same technology in your local drugstore. Okay, so from right to left, you have slightly more pressure. You've got 54% of your pressure on your trail side, okay? And front to back, you're pretty balanced.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, for your students, when they find somebody that has this type of technology, that's the hardest part at the beginning. Again, we've got imbalances where we live life, we do things. Very rare that an amateur steps up on these things and can balance themselves right to left and front to back.
When I got involved in physiology, we started doing this, and we had force plates. Mm-hmm. So the first thing we'd have people do is come in and stand on them, mm-hmm. and just say, get balanced in your feet, just so you got 50-50 on both sides of the middle of your feet. And then we'd look at it, not even close. Some people were 80-20, and they thought they were 50-50. Right. And so that helped us also understand, which side of the body's dysfunctional and what they're trying to get away from,
Right.
and their overall perception or sense of where they are in space and time.
Right.
So I mean, I'm looking at that, and even me, like you said, I was set a little more right than I really should be.
Right. So the best players in the world that are in the U.S. set up with about 55% of their pressure in their lead side. Now in Europe, they set up with a little closer to 60. Or somebody from like West Texas. So if you're used to playing firm conditions and in the wind, where crisp contact is more important and you got to keep the ball down, then you're going to set up just a little more in your trail side. But if the general population set up at 50-50, we'd be winning a battle.
Right.
Okay, so let's go ahead and set up to this one. So I'll say these words a couple of different times so that we can get it. But 50-50. Favor the lead side just a hair. If you can get somewhere around 55%, that's great.
Okay.
Now, I want you to take it to left arm parallel going back. Okay, this is an interesting part in the swing. We talk about getting loaded up into that trail side, and you had your thing where it was, shifting your weight's a bad idea. Okay. So I don't want you to think about it as shifting your weight. I want you to think about it as shifting your pressure. So what you're doing is you're loading into that coil. Jack used to say the inside of that instep, right?
Right.
So if you could picture a rod that would go from up at the top of his head off at an angle, it would go straight down into that instep, right? We didn't shift our weight because your arms and the club head weigh about 20% of your body weight.
Yeah.
So you moved that thing around and you shifted your pressure. Interestingly enough, this is as far to the trail side as you need to shift your pressure. And it should be, with an iron, about 75%. So think about that for a second. How much pressure do you need to load into your trail side to get that to somewhere around 75%? Okay? Now, at that moment in time, the pressure needs to reroute toward the lead foot. Okay, and you talked about Joe Nichols, right?
Right.
And when he was always trying to get you, when does transition happen? When does transition happen?
Right.
Well, there's two transitions. There's a transition of your pressure and a transition of your hands.
That's right.
And so he was always trying to get you almost right off the ball. Because if you're parked way back here, well, you got to speed that up.
Well, see, that's part of what happened to me, is because when I came out of baseball, that transition was, your arms are going this way, your body's going this way.
Step away from the bat.
Step away from that. That was, I mean, I spent thousands of hours doing that in the backyard, hitting the tire. Okay, when I came to golf, I did it.
Right.
And then the first lesson I took, this guy said, okay, here's what you got to do. You get set up, and then you got to load your right side and get up here and be able to stand there for 2 to 3 seconds where you could lift your left foot off the ground and just stand there. And so I go, okay. The problem was when I did that, now I got up here and now I'm stopped. And he said, now you want to swing up to there and then go. And my brain, I just went into a massive anxiety attack. Because two things. My body didn't want a sequence. I wanted to move at it from my upper body. And I kept hitting everything fat. I kept hitting behind it.
Right.
And that was kind of accepted. Load your right side,
Sure.
Stand on your right side. And so I practiced hundreds of hours doing that. And I ended up having to lean on the thing to get back up to it,
Right.
to be able to catch the ball, catch the ground.
Right.
And so, what you're saying, we start talking about transition. And when it happens, Joe, well, he saved me because I was in that world and I was so screwed up. And so I made a swing and he goes, so when do you start changing directions? I says, it's right here. He says, okay, well, get your club and I'll tell you when you start. So I set up to it and I started the club back and he goes, now. And I went, what? I go, well, I'm not even to the top yet. He goes, well, first of all, there is no top. And I went, well, there's no top. He goes, no, there is no top. There's a start and a finish. It's a constant motion.
Right.
So if you're thinking top, you're dead. So when I tried to start changing directions here, all of a sudden, the old baseball stuff started to come back.
Right.
And all of a sudden, my arms started to track correctly. And all of a sudden, I could get up to the ball. It was like magic.
Right.
And it was just a timing of change of directions.
So let's go over those positions again.
Okay.
And I don't like positions, but think of them as windows, okay?
Okay.
And we'll come back to that at another point. So 50-50, as close as you can get it, favor the lead side just a little bit.
All right,
okay?
got it, right there.
Now, let's get to, halfway back, somewhere around this position, with an iron, 75% of your pressure on the trail side. At this point in time, the pressure needs to reroute toward the lead side while the club is still going back.
Right.
That is separation.
Right.
Okay? So when you want to talk about coil or whatever verbiage you want to use, but the ability to have your hands still moving up and your pressure starting to get into the lead side is the separation you want. That differential between your center of mass and center of pressure is that thing that allows you to create power.
Now, folks, listen. What we've talked about here, it starts to sound complicated, but here's all what Ryan just said. Here's all it is. If every one of you took a ball and you went to throw it, here's what he's talking about. When you go to throw a ball, as you take your arm back, where does your body go? So about the time your arm gets right here, what does your body do? See, what doesn't happen is you don't take the ball in your arm and your body all the way back to here and then try to throw.
Exactly.
So you hit a tennis ball, you hit a forehand in tennis. As the racket's going back, you're going forward. So we're explaining something in a little bit of detail, but all of you know how to do it. If you've played any sports, if you've thrown a ball, hit a tennis ball, hit a baseball, you know how this transition works. It's just, unfortunately, a lot of what we've done in our industry has taken people out of who they are as an athlete and put them into a science lab trying to duplicate things that in science are correct, but the overall flow of a swing, sometimes it can be a little detrimental.
Right. So 50-50 at setup, favor the lead side just a little bit.
Got it.
About 75% halfway back, start to transition your pressure forward, and at the top of the swing, if you got somewhere close to 50-50 again, that'd be a win.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be exactly 50-50, but a window, right? So when you got to 75, you're getting closer to 50-50. As long as the pressure ball is moving toward the lead side before the hands come down, that's a win.
We're okay.
That's a win. Okay? So now here's the interesting one, and this is where the science agrees when you talk about Jack, how Jack used to get that heel and replant it down and push away. Or the best example of it now is Rory McIlroy or Brooks Koepka, right? And so when you're after transition and when you get to lead arm parallel or shaft vertical, depending on which PhD paper you're reading, you're basically pressing as hard as you can into the ground with your lead foot.
Right.
Okay? So there is a correlation, and if you want, I've got a graphic for it, but it shows the research that basically it's like a 0.9 correlation to shaft vertical and being able to get max pressure into the lead foot.
Right.
Okay? So think about that in terms of the post up, right? If you were trying to post up impact and pressure, at the same time you're trying to manage your vertical force, your lateral force, your hand path, face, and bottom of the arc, all at the same moment. And we've all practiced that so it makes sense. But what I'm telling you is that if you can get that, and you feel like, when we had it in the backswing, we had this pole kind of sticking here. If you can get it the other way, going here, you've got all the time in the world to let that square club face to the arc come right into the ball.
See, when I started, as soon as I had an aha moment back to athleticism,
right,
and I started changing directions the way I always had in a baseball swing, all of a sudden what it did for me, what you were just saying there, is when I did the whole baseball thing again, all of a sudden I'm right here and I'm already into my left side, and now this was so easy to time, where before I was here and everything was kind of going together. And I mean, as much as I practiced, it was hard to be really consistent with it. And so that whole, what you're saying, that whole timing of that change of directions to where I got to my left side and pressured this, and then this pushed as I went through, all of a sudden, it was, well, that's easy.
Right.
Plus, it was what I had done from the time I was 2 or 3 years old all the way through my sports career that then got derailed in golf. And so that's why it became so difficult in another game, because they took all of the things I naturally did and said, they're not going to work in golf. See, golf's different. And what we're seeing here, basically, if you put a baseball player up here or a tennis player, you're going to see the same things.
Well, interestingly enough, that brings up one of these history things. So if you want to read the biographies of Mr. Hogan and things like that, you know, one of his big teachers was Sam Bird, right? And Sam Bird played for the Yankees with Babe Ruth,
Right.
the best hitter ever, right?
Right.
But Babe's thing was he was told the golf swing is nothing like the baseball swing, right? So Babe really liked to lift his arms, he liked to hang back. You know, he was playing with hickory shafts at that point in time. But Sam was like, that's nonsense. I don't want to screw. I'm not Babe Ruth. I don't want to screw up my baseball swing to get a golf swing. So he would do the same things in his baseball swing that he did in his golf swing. Now he goes on to become an amazing professional golfer, an amazing teacher. And, you know, around about the time Mr. Hogan changed his game from being a guy who hooked the ball to being the ball striker we all revere, he was hanging out with Sam Bird.
Right.
And so what we're saying is that this is no different. And it was funny because when I first got in contact with Mike, I said, this technology will show you nothing that you didn't already know. It's just going to give a visual representation to all of us who are with you. So again, it is that natural flow of motion. Think of this pressure ball almost as a flow of electricity, right? Because that's really what it is. There's an electrical current running through here, and we measure the conductance between two layers of electrical current. And that's what it's showing. I mean, it provides force and pressure. And we have a whole bunch of medical applications and things like that that are much more necessary for survival than this, but this is fun. So again, 50-50.
Right.
75, 80% if it's a driver, but we're not talking 90, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, get back to 50-50 and then 80-20 and push as hard as you can into the ground at left arm parallel through impact.
Can I make a swing and see what it gets?
Yeah, let's see what you got here.
See what I got. Oh, a little off balance.
A little off balance. You know, interestingly enough, that trace went from, go ahead and set up on the mat there. And I just want to show you something that you do that's for an iron very preferential, right? You route your center of pressure trace to your trail heel and then over to your lead heel.
Yeah.
Okay. So like we said, just like in skiing, you know, you talk about controlling the edges. You don't control the edges with your toes.
Right.
You get them back there in the center of your foot, which provides what we're going to call the most consistent way to play an iron. Right. Maybe not the furthest, but remember I said the concentric circles, right?
Right.
So if your center of pressure is moving in a linear fashion, it means your center of mass is moving in a linear fashion, which means the face has very little deviation.
Right.
Okay. So let's hit another one. Let's see how this goes. Again, a center of pressure trace that routed through the center of the foot. A very good strike. Now, let's talk about guys who hit it really far.
Okay.
So, I've been lucky enough to be around some of the guys that hit the ball as far as anybody really ever has. You and I both worked with Justin James.
Yeah.
I had a chance to meet with Kyle Berkshire, Jamie Sedlowski, Jason Zubak, good friend of mine, Monty Scheinblum. You know, all these guys, they have what we're going to affectionately call a Z trace. And this is where you see that lead foot leaving the ground.
Yeah.
Okay. It was really funny. We were showing the video of Justin James. So Justin James has won the 2 World Long Drive events this year that they've had with a club head speed over 150 miles an hour.
That's more than most people's ball speed.
Yeah. But what you are going to see is that that foot leaves the ground. And I want you to talk about offsetting forces and why that happens, because from a golf instructor, but also a physiology background, why is that foot leaving the ground?
Well, first of all, and I've spent some time with Justin, and he started to get into, he was trying to create this force here, but then he started to come right straight up.
Right.
And when you're swinging a golf club, as it's coming down and you go here, there's this force, it's an inward force actually, this club's creating a force this way. Well, you have to be doing something as it's going through here. You have to offset what that is. Now, the faster that thing's moving, there's a lot of force, and it's trying to pull you that way. So to stabilize and accelerate this, once you hit here, this has to push back and away. So what they're doing is they've got so much speed and force to keep it stable and keep it accelerating, they have to go whoosh and push back so hard with that leg to offset the force of the club going this way and they're going this way. To stabilize and accelerate the club, it's just offsetting force. If they didn't do that, they'd fall down, they wouldn't hit it very far.
So correlate that to the average club player. So that club head weighs 250 grams,
Yep.
roughly. So now let's say they're swinging at 80 miles an hour.
Then what you've got is it's like when you come down into the ball, it's 20 to 30 pounds of force, which is a lot.
Okay.
That's trying to pull you this way.
Right. So if you don't offset that centrifugal or centripetal, whichever one you want to use to make it easy, going this way, you're going to go with it.
Which is most amateurs when they fall off balance, which is what I did on that very first swing.
Exactly.
And here's me now, because I understand these forces and what it feels like, I'll only make one swing like that. Because the next I'm going to make a practice swing to swing the club and feel, okay, I got this force going through here. What do I have to do to offset it and balance it so that I don't fall down? Most amateurs that I work with is they're coming into the ball, they've been taught, get off your right side, clear your hips, so they go like this, and if they lose their balance, they step this way.
Right.
They're, unless somebody's got a downhill lie or something on tour, nobody falls that way. If they fall any way, they all fall backwards, because they're pushing away from that outward force of the club.
So when you see a tour player or somebody that plays really well, and it could go from Patrick Reed, he's got that foot that comes this way,
Yeah.
right? Tiger Woods back when he used to really straighten that leg hard before things started to fall apart, or any of the long drive, Bubba Watson, but a lot of the females that hit it a long way too. Laura Davies
Thompson,
used to have, that is the resultant of them trying to offset a force going this way, but getting prepared for it early, right? They've got all that pressure built up onto this front side. They can offset, and then these two forces are going in opposite directions, so this foot has some left over, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about what Francesco Molinari was trying to do, which is get here and jump.
Yeah, no.
That's not what we're talking about. So interestingly enough, again, center of pressure. If you don't have that foot on the ground, it's no longer part of your center of pressure. So when you get a player like Justin Thomas, Patrick Reed, all of these guys hitting the ball, and you see their center of pressure all of a sudden back up because this foot has left the ground, what you'll notice though is they're still pushing their center of mass forward.
With their back foot at that point.
So with our amateurs, especially our high handicappers, and this is where the mat can become a real value, especially with a long iron. So let me grab a 4-iron for you here. Again, that 4-iron's probably got, 22 degrees aloft?
Yep, that's exactly.
Okay, but the mechanics of this are to hit down.
Right.
If you try to hit up, you'll see the center of pressure back up, but also your center of mass will back.
Yeah.
So that's a really good way to use this mat for the average player, is with those long irons and woods and things that you're trying to get airborne, but you're doing it by trying to help that thing into the air. What you'll see is that'll back up.
Yeah.
So if you're not strong enough, you're a junior, you're a senior, you're somebody who just doesn't have the right concept, and you're trying to help it, you'll see that center of pressure back up, and immediately your professional or yourself, if you're one of these bays that has these as a rental, you can say, okay, well, wait a minute, that backed up. What do I need to do? I need to maintain that pressure into my lead side and stabilize that.
Right.
So that's an interesting way to use this mat.
The other thing you said earlier, which I understand, the creating of maximum force this way into the ball of your foot. Here's what I would tell all of you, and this is kind of, and then we can wrap this up for what this does for people. The biggest thing I've learned that helps people is you got to understand you play this game more from your heels than you do from your toes.
Yes.
Now, you're seeing a lot of guys, Tony Finau, when you see him hit a golf ball, when he comes into the golf ball and hits it, his both feet are off the ground like this. So he's on his heels swiveling like this. So if you move out and you keep sliding, you're in trouble. And that's what I see with most people. So when I get them on this and I say, okay, look at your force, I say, go back, put your force into your right heel, then move force into the ball of your left foot, then back to your left heel. So they feel that right when their arms come down to the impact. It's a whole new sensation for them because
Sure.
they keep trying to stay out on the balls of their feet, which, again, locks their rotation up.
Yeah. Now, we've talked a lot about moving that center of pressure around. But one of the easiest things to do with any of these products, but specifically the BodiTrak, because it's so mobile. So you can throw this in a bunker. You
Yeah.
can put it on the putting green. You can do the short game. I want you to show me what you're going to do with your pressure with a 58-degree wedge there, and what that pressure trace is going to look like. Okay, so what I want you to notice is that that pressure started closer to your left heel,
Oh, yeah.
moved very slightly back, and stayed there.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that, for most players who are newer to the game or don't have as much skill around the greens, they're trying to have that driver sort of pressure shift,
Oh, yeah.
okay, which adds a lot of tilt. And essentially what it does is just, we talk about this circle that you're swinging around, is move that circle a couple of inches back this way.
Right.
And now with a short shot and a short club and a heavy club, so that's the heaviest club in your bag,
That's right.
is now you've got to get that circle moved back. So one of the great things with this is either on a short pitch shot or a bunker shot, you can park that center of pressure ball just inside your lead instep and leave it there.
See, that's how, when I teach short game or when I practice, I basically stand on this foot, which is right where you are there, and that's where I start, and that's how I that's how I practice right there. Now my right foot, when I put it on the ground, up to about 120 yards is more just a little bit of stability, but I'm not moving much force.
Right.
That force isn't moving.
Right.
It's staying up here because I want to control trajectory, I want to control distance, and I don't need to hit it a long ways.
So if we think about it this way, if you start with the shortest club in your bag, which would be your putter,
Right?
you want the least amount of pressure shift possible.
Correct.
Okay, so that's controlling the face.
Right.
Okay, easy to do with the BodiTrak mat. Sit there on the putting green. You're able to have your iPad right out there. You can see that your trace doesn't really move.
See, that was another thing that was helpful for me in putting, is because when I got set up on this, I noticed that I was leaning out towards my toes, which in putting might not be bad because it locks my structural muscles and I won't move. But I'm off balance, so now now my brain's going, you're going to fall down, so there's an anxiety in there. So I was a little towards my toes when I was putting, and as soon as I moved back right there where I got centered and I set up, it's like everything calmed down a little bit. And then I made strokes to see if I could make strokes, and I was looking at the screen, and I wanted to make strokes where that pressure didn't move. And when the first couple of times I did it, I had a little move forward with the putter, which
Right.
is a speed producer, which then plays into distance control.
Right.
So being able to monitor that with putting, and then you go to, like you say, chipping and pitching and make sure it's moving, and then you gradually, as the club gets longer, forces move a little bit more and be able to see if they're moving correctly. Again, we're right back into immediate feedback if you know what you're looking at,
Right.
because most people practice the wrong things.
So the interesting thing is, our site, other companies that sell these products, they all have all of their instructors that have these things listed on a map. So you can just go to any one of their sites. You can go to BodiTrakPerformance.com. You can go to the other sites and find where one of these is. One of the interesting things we're going to do with BodiTrak is that we're going to be putting these in driving ranges. So you're going to be able to have a launch monitor and the pressure trace there for a nominal fee where you can sit there and work on that yourself. Again, the keys are not that complicated.
Right.
The shorter the shot, the less pressure we're going to get into the trail side. Start out as balanced as you can be. By the time you get here, this should only be 75, maybe 80% with a driver toward your trail side. Get that pressure moving into your lead side so that when you're here, you're stable. You're at about 80% to 20%, and you can then push away and let that club face come through. And I promise you, it's gonna feel different, and it should. But what it's gonna do is by the third swing, you're gonna say, I've got so much time to hit the ball.
What's interesting, what Ryan just said there, I get people all the time when I first do this with them in golf. Now I have them throw a baseball, and they immediately change directions correctly. So don't throw it as far. Okay, so less force goes. Throw it a little further, a little more force goes. Hit a tennis ball, okay? Then I take them with a golf club and I say, okay, copy that. And they go, well, that's too quick. I'm swinging too fast. I go, no, it's not fast. It's a sooner change of directions, but you're not swinging faster. So they've got this program in their head that a golf swing is swing to the top and go forward. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't any others. I give them a tennis racket or anything else. Not one of them goes up to the top and then tries to go forward. As soon as I give them this, they lose that sequence. Right. So what most of you are going to feel, like you said, it is going to feel different relative to golf because you're back being an athlete. And unfortunately, with positions in a stationary ball, we've been able to focus on the top.
Right.
Which I think may be one of the top 10 worst things in golf is focusing on your top position. I know where I want it, but how do I move forces so that the club goes through that spot right, rather than that being a static position? Because if you static the top, there's no way to sequence correctly.
Sequence is an interesting, and I do want to bring this up before we have to go, though. The human body, like you said, we've been studying human movement since the original Olympic Games, right? And if you think about those classic things, a javelin or a shot put, that's where the biomechanical research first really started. So if you think about that, you've got some component of what they would call glide, or we would call lateral motion.
Yeah.
You got some sort of spin or rotational motion, and then some form of launch. Interestingly enough, that formula doesn't change for the golf swing. You have a window to use your lateral force, a window to use your rotational force, and then a window to use your vertical.
That's right.
And these are the windows. So somewhere from transition of the club head down to of the first third of the swing, where if your swing's here, it's a little different, but it is your ability to use the lateral drive in your swing.
Yeah.
Then from there until somewhere in this position, that's your ability to use your rotation. Then you've got your vertical. So interestingly enough, it's just like the rocket booster with 3 stages. Now, unfortunately, if you fire rocket booster number 3 before you fire number 1, you don't get number 1 back.
Did you come up with that?
I did not. That's a Mike Adams and E.A. Tischler thing.
Okay.
But
I like that.
But the interesting thing is, so there are very few players that maximize all 3. If you maximize all 3, you're either a long drive professional, a really high level amateur, or somebody like Justin Rose. And Mike Adams calls those guys the triple dippers, right? They get up above that tour maximum
in all
three,
yeah,
sequenced at the right time. Most of us produce things that are in usually 2. Now, you can use 2. Brooks Koepka is a really great thing. He's got a lot of lateral and a lot of vertical, but not a lot of rotational.
Yeah.
Whereas his good buddy Dustin Johnson is a lot of lateral and a lot of rotational, right? But they effectively use those for their most efficient swing. So that's not something that I think the average person should really self-diagnose on, but it's a really important concept to get to the point that, okay, that's why I've got to get this pressure moving the way I do, because I've got to use these rocket boosters at the right time.
Right. Because
if I use them incorrectly, I don't get to use the one I lost. So if you're back here, and 90% of our club golfers have the same error. They got their pressure too far this way, and they never got it back this way. And that is the over the top, or the other one, which is here and dumped under.
Right.
Both of those are the same fix. We're just going to get your pressure over sooner.
Okay, folks. So here's again, when we start talking about this and why Malaska golf, and I keep talking about, no, don't just play golf, understand it and make it and simplify it down. Everything we've been talking about, the simplified side of it is, like I said, when you throw a ball or hit a tennis ball or anything you've done multiple times, it's what a golf swing is. The same motions, the same sequences, these forces, all you're trying to do is learn how to tie into and balance and offset these forces. They're not static. So you got to be really careful about when you start working on positions. What this BodiTrak does, and I love it because even for me, I know where my pressure needs to be and I know where my balance should be and I know what it should do through my swing. If it's a little off, I can start making some changes. But little teeny tiny changes are hard to make. And for most of you, you have to exaggerate things so far to actually get that to say what it's supposed to, that unless you had the technology saying, okay, that's better, you probably would never stay with it because you'd say, there's no way that's correct. And I get that every day. When I finally get somebody to do what they're supposed to do, they go, oh, that can't be right. My answer to most of them is, well, you're not very good. I'm not so sure I'd be trusting what you felt anyway. So this is where this technology comes into play. If you can have access to it and you get the right numbers and you know how to practice, it's immediate feedback. So Ryan,
Mike,
pal, I mean, it's been a pleasure over the years, and you guys, just keep doing what you're doing, and I appreciate, and then get in touch with BodiTrak or any of these guys online. And so most of you, a lot of you aren't going to buy a BodiTrak, but you have access to them.
you can have access to them. We do sell them. If
Oh, no,
people are
for sure.
interested.
I've got
one
one.
of these setups. Yeah, Mike's got one. They are something you can understand. We do have certifications, that help you understand these things. I would encourage you to go to anybody's that sells this type of. They all have really great education, same sort of scientists. No, none of these guys are in disagreement with each other.
Right.
That's the beautiful thing. Whether you're looking at Swing Catalyst, Smart to Move, My Swing, BodiTrak, all their PhDs agree. So
Yeah,
it's not like you're going to go to one site and it contradicts the other. This is how it works.
Well, again, a lot of what's happening with the biomechanics, that we know how the body moves. And so where I'm coming from too is 35 years, I kind of fell into this early and I understood some things that a lot of guys didn't. And what's interesting to me is how similar and how more tight the swing is getting relative to what's acceptable. Because if you get it out of sequence, then the joints don't work. You create pressure and forces that you're not supposed to have. That's detrimental. Now we have technologies that'll help you to see where you're at. And again, being able to see where you're at and then seeing where you need to get to is an incredible piece of information that most people in the years past had no access to. It was impossible to get. So technology now is affordable and accessible. If you know what you're looking at, it's going to make you a better player because you're going to know what to practice. Again, Ryan, thanks,
sir.
pal. Appreciate it.